or it will blow out.
Yeah, I might as well just start recording now because I always forget to record.
Yep, it just said recording in progress. So I think we're good. I'm gonna try to catch up on a couple of things.
Okay, cool. Oop, and Carrie is arriving, so I'm gonna let her in.
I just did. I'm so fast.
Hi, Carrie.
Hey, Carrie.
Hi there. How are you?
We're excellent. Thank you for your adaptiveness with our yo-yoing.
That's okay. Do you want to pause recording until we're ready to start?
He's just gonna cut it off.
Oh, okay.
Because inevitably we have a boo-boo when we're starting.
Inevitably, all of the things that you're trying to manage right at the beginning, letting people in and screen sharing and everything, it just always gets messy. So
I understand. I'm going to run and get a beverage before we get started. I'll be right back.
Cool. Hi, Megan.
Hello. Sorry, I couldn't get my video to start.
Oh, all good. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you?
Pretty well. Yeah.
Good. That's
Just-
what we like to hear.
Yeah. Just getting some last minute stuff done and we'll be totally good to go.
Sounds good.
So I'm gonna have this welcome screen up as people arrive. Probably start letting people in right around 3, and hopefully within a few minutes we'll be good to start with some introductions. I'll just do a quick introduction of you guys and then I'll hand it over to you to screen share and present however you see fit.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks.
Let's make sure that
Right now I can't screen share, so if you want to enable that.
great. Yeah, I might
Nathan?
have to have Melissa do that because she is technically I'm a co-host as well.
I think both Carrie and I need the access if that's helpful.
Yeah.
How are you today?
Pretty good. Yeah. Kind of a hectic day. I was long dentist appointment just,
Oh, no, that's
so
never.
that was not very exciting, but
Mm.
other than that, things are going well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how they manage your stress, sort of.
Yeah.
Anyway, I heard you, I was passing the computer, I heard you say Melissa should do.
Yeah. Can you give both Carrie and Megan screen share access
I
or
can-
co-host? Either way is
Done.
great.
Oh, wait, this will stop others screen sharing. Wait a minute.
Well, that's just if they actively start, it would stop.
Okay,
my
this,
screen
I have
share.
multiple participants can share simultaneously. That should work.
Oh, you shouldn't even need that. It just means that when they start sharing their slides, it'll knock off my welcome screen, but I'll probably take that down anyway. But I think it'll be fine.
Okay, hold on.
Did we end up getting
Okay.
some registrants?
Yeah. Yeah, and there was a few more in the last few days. I think some of our county people who are involved in UGREEN may have signed up too, which should be great.
Oh, great. Let me turn off my.
Yeah, they're real interested in this model. Okay, would I make everybody co-host? Would that help?
I think that should be fine. Yeah.
No, you
Okay.
already gave us permission. You don't need to.
Yeah, okay, well, you're just in case it has any use, you are all co-hosts.
Okay, that
Don't
works.
let anyone in yet. I want to wait.
Okay,
for a little
I'm
closer. I do see
laying off it. Is that Bill McKnight?
that. Maybe. Yeah, he's just showing up as
Oh, good. He's a longtime energy efficiency, like one of the top contractors, really respected. And he's on the Workforce Investment Board. So that's this is going to work.
Great.
Okay. I'm going to mute for.
And thank you both so much for doing this.
Of course, thanks for inviting us.
I'm really excited to get the spiel too. I
You're
feel
gonna
like I
learn
definitely have a sense of
Well, you're gonna get the spiel, so hope you don't regret saying that.
I feel like I have a sense of what you guys do, but it seems like there's so many different aspects of what you do. And it's
Yeah.
some of it's complex. I'm like, oh, interesting. Like kind of makes sense to me, but I want to hear more about that. So yeah.
I'm glad you're curious because you're going to learn, and hopefully we will uncomplicate it,
Great.
because it is a little complicated.
Mhm.
We're always struggling to find the language to make it less complicated. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I understand that feeling. We Sustainable Hudson Valley has like all of these different projects that aren't, for the most part, really connected to each other. And so people are often like, what do you do? Or, oh, I see you're doing this now. And I'm like, I don't know about that one, actually. Like, that's someone else.
Yeah, we do a lot for a small team, I have to say. So I think it gets more complicated to describe it. But Megan and I'll give an overview of Jobs First and our different areas of work, but we're going to then hone in on one area, and Megan will highlight what we think will be the two high interest projects for this group. One is our Green Economy Network, and the other is a skills mapping initiative that uses the artificial intelligence that we talked a little bit about with you.
That's great. Cool. Yeah, I'm definitely interested to learn more about the Green Economy Network.
Yes,
How that works. And the
Megan's
skills,
star today.
Yeah.
You'll
And
be
the
the
skills- the skills mapping is interesting to me too. It's another one of those things where I'm like, this is really interesting, but I don't really understand it, but I understand that there's some sort of complex network mapping going on.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, well, I'll give people like another minute or two and just see, and then let everyone in and mute them, and we can go from there.
Sounds good.
I'm just curious, you guys see the share screen
Yes.
as the primary thing?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. I'm sharing it as a window, so I'm like, have all of these different things open to manage people entering and stuff, but
I know, yeah, it's hard when you're doing both.
it's working. Hmm. Melissa, are you there?
Yes.
I feel like I should let people in, although right now we just have Bill. Sharon from the workforce development was just in the waiting room, but she left the waiting room. But I don't know if you would want to like send her a text or email or something, or what happened there, but
Yeah, I'll ping her.
okay. What do you think? Should I let
Yeah, I
you
think
know,
Bill is a
we'll
friendly
start?
soul. He can hang.
Okay. And I'm gonna mute everyone, but you guys can obviously unmute yourselves.
I'm gonna mute
whenever.
myself too.
Okay. She's back. Hello, welcome, folks. People are trickling in, but we're just gonna start to get things going here. So I just muted folks as they arrive, but we would love to have you introduce yourselves in the chat box and anything about your organization or business or company that is relevant, or why you're here, what your interest is. And you can also ask questions at any point in that same chat box. And then after the presentation, we're going to open it up to a more like back and forth Q&A. So today's presentation is Jobs First NYC, identifying, building, and advancing what works. And Jobs First NYC has all sorts of different workforce development related projects, and I'll let them talk about that. But I'll start by just giving a little introduction to our two presenters today, Carrie Faulhaber and Megan Marshall. So Carrie Faulhaber is Jobs First NYC's Vice President. In this role, she leads work solutions and communications, identifying, designing, and advancing practices and policies that achieve better outcomes for employers and workers. She's been with Jobs First NYC since 2013, serving as a senior fellow before that, leading partnership development and young adult sectoral employment project. And before that, she was working as a director of operations at Public-Private Ventures, also overseeing large-scale workforce projects. She's an expert in the field, and we're lucky to have her here. And then we have Megan Marshall as well, also from Jobs First NYC, and she's the manager of work solutions. She advances the organization's strategies by identifying, cultivating, and engaging sector-based partnerships and bridging the relationship between employers, community-based partners, and policymakers. Before working with Jobs First NYC, Megan worked with the New York State Assembly member Mathilde Frontis and played a key role in supporting communication strategies and legislative agenda. For that, she was also involved as a program coordinator for non-traditional employment for women. So we have two great workforce experts here today, and we're excited to hear more about what they do and what Jobs First NYC does. And I think I'll hand it over to you guys to present. So thank you so much again. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm just gonna get my screen share up here in just a moment.
Great. While you do that, I will say good afternoon. And thanks for being here. We've got a small group, so feel free to come off mute and chime in at any time that you have a question or if you want us to clarify something. My name's Carrie Fallhaber, and thank you, Krista, for that introduction. I want to acknowledge that representatives from Ulster County have been participating in Jobs First NYC's work here in New York City in the development of our Green Economy Network. It's been a couple of years and they've been involved with us, and thank you to Melissa and Christo and Michael, who's not here, but after learning more about Jobs First and our work developing the Green Economy Network for New York City, invited us to come and speak with you today. And as Christo said, I'm here with my colleague Megan, who I think you kind of already said hello, but if you want to say a quick hi, yeah, you gave a wave, great. Why don't we just dig in then? Megan, you could drive the slides for me and I'll do the same for you. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Jobs First NYC, we are an organization, a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing economic mobility for young adults in their communities. And we create and advance solutions that break down barriers, transform systems, supporting young adults and their communities. And we really do this by bringing together all available resources to connect young adults to the economic life of New York City. And we ultimately are improving and connecting systems to achieve better societal outcomes. And if you have, if there's anything specific that you want to learn about Jobs First and about our work, feel free to put that in chat as we go along, and I'll check back and look to see if there are any questions that came up along the way. But you can move to the next slide, Megan. So Jobs First was formed in 2006, before the numbers here actually start. We actually were the organization that started looking at this specific data point, and we did that. We started doing that around 2010, but we were formed in 2006 when the number of young adults in New York City who were out of school and out of work was close to 200,000. And New York City's private philanthropy and nonprofits that serve young adults from underrepresented communities came together, and they were thinking about, what's needed to really keep an eye on this specific problem. How are we going to intentionally reduce that number? And they decided that designing some sort of organization that stayed focused on how best to address what was really a crisis was most important. And that's, Jobs First formed from that. In 2008, there was the Great Recession, and we had, by 2010, 22% or around 187,000 18 to 24-year-olds were out of school and not working in New York City. And then plus an additional 40,000 or so were underemployed. And so combined, this number was 35% of all 18 to 24-year-olds in New York City. And there were job recovery, following the recession, there were job recovery programs, but really job recovery for young adults was slow. And it was mostly concentrated in lower wage jobs in three sectors: the lower end of retail, healthcare, and hospitality. And they had high turnover rates, limited career progress, a lot of part-time work, and low income growth. Then heading into the pandemic, you could see here, number around 2019, numbers were nearly cut in half. During the pandemic and now coming out of it, we're looking at somewhere back at close to where we were when Jobs First was formed. And we're coming out with a report soon that talks about how the pandemic really reversed nearly a decade of positive trends. Next slide. The challenge. What is the challenge? There's a lot of challenges. I'm sure you experience it there as well. But for us here, we really look at that nonprofits struggled, coming out of the recession and now with COVID, nonprofits struggled to work with employers to hire young adults into higher wage jobs, and had difficulty working in collaboration with each other due to what is maybe perceived as competition and competing for what they think are limited resources. And government and philanthropy had really not proposed a strategic solution to address the high young adult unemployment. The real challenge that we see is that the systems that are designed to advance the livelihood of young adults and their communities are fragmented. They're slow to respond to rapid changing economy. And as a demand for a skilled labor force increases, there's a shift that's needed to effectively prepare new generations to lead our economy. So what's the opportunity, right? Where there's challenge, there's opportunity. We see it as that transforming these systems requires replicable, scalable, evidence-based approaches to advance really new ideas, bold solutions that are built through collaboration. And this is where Jobs First comes in. Our approach to transforming systems, it requires this very intentional type of collaboration, and we've developed a process for doing that as a neutral partner. Jobs First, we see ourselves as this neutral and objective partner. We bring together diverse partnerships through this collaborative change process. And it's a 5-step process to identify challenges, incubate new solutions, and advance what works. And the bedrock of our process is our core values. And I'm going to go over these because these are really important. People first. We see this as the community stakeholders who are central to everything that we do, to our process, ensuring that they decide what they need. Bold ideas is really encouraging this outside the box thinking. It's supported and it's celebrated. Collective genius, we recognize that together we can accomplish more than any one organization, one entity can accomplish alone. And informed objectivities, to also recognize that listening is super important, but so is data. So are facts, and we do a lot of data collection in all of our work, and we focus on results. And this process, it works across systems, and it's community and people-centered, and it relies on partnership. Our partners cut across multiple systems supporting young adults to succeed in education, in workforce development, in economic development. And it includes all of the different groups that you see here, from investors to educators to policymakers and more. And everything that we do, Jobs First, as an intermediary or as this kind of systems level actor, is done through partnership. And we focus on that in our work in 4 key solutions areas. And those solutions areas are community, with a focus on New York City's neighborhoods with the highest rates of 18 to 24-year-olds who are not in school and not working. And in education, consistently working to make sure students leave school with skills to succeed in the workforce and or a plan, a career plan, a post-secondary plan, steps to attach to the workforce. In our work solutions, we focus on continuing skills building, increasing access to good jobs, and understanding the needs of employers. And in policy, kind of cuts across it all, making sure that good things that we build and discover in good practice, making sure it sticks through recommendations for legislation to support, scale, and replicate what works. The quality of a community's workforce is really the most important competitive asset that it can offer current and prospective employers. And so through all of this work, Jobs First is very focused on what is our impact. It's hard, you know, when you think of nonprofit, I think a lot of people are very familiar with direct service organizations that work directly with people with needs, whether it's in education, workforce development, food insecurity, housing. Those are really most familiar to a lot of our partners, a lot of employers and people who aren't in this space. But for Jobs First, as an intermediary trying to align systems, measuring what we do is really important. So we came up with this impact framework to measure that impact in 4 areas. People, and in a lot of the work that Megan and I focus on, for people, we think about employees. And one of the ways of measuring that is to consider, are more people in better positions than they were before they started? We measure the impact on institutions and think about employers or businesses as an example of institutions. And one way that we measure this is to ask, you know, has an employer changed their practice? Like, have they shortened the recruit to hire process, or has their retention improved because of the partnership that they're a part of? We measure impact for the partnership itself. And for this, we consider, are the partners training more job seekers than they did independently? And these examples are just one measure of effectiveness. And then for systems, which really, you know, for us, it's the ultimate goal to improve systems. And one way we measure that is to ask, are there new policies because of this effort? Has something changed in legislation to hold good practice in place? Positive results in these areas will help us to identify what's working and what we should do more of. And this, I won't go over this. I know there's a lot on here. These are just examples of Jobs First partnerships in the 4 areas that I described. So our community partnerships, our education partnerships, our policy partnerships, and our work solutions partnerships. Most of these that you see here, we continue to support and expand. Jobs First designed and or developed these, and we support them on an ongoing basis. Today, we're going to zoom in on the work solutions and tell you about a couple of these partnerships. But first, I just want to highlight in all of this work, Jobs First role, right? What is the role of an intermediary? If it's not clear from how I described our process in that work, I just want to call out that large scale challenges, like the things that we think about, and Megan will talk more about, like, how do you increase access for underrepresented populations in the green economy? That's a large scale challenge, right? Well, large scale challenges require large scale solutions, require lots of people at the table, and those people need to come from really varied stakeholders and varied perspectives. And as an organization working across systems, Jobs First is often acting as a consultant that brings new or added capacity to each partner at the table. So what might this look like? There's some examples here, right? We might identify need areas and we'll steward the process of partnership development. We can develop or bring the tools needed for a partnership to succeed, for them to create governance and, you know, figure out what their theory of change is. And some of those tools and resources that we bring are literally resources like investments from philanthropy, public or private philanthropy. We also make sure that we're shining a light on these issues and making sure that people know what's happening and what's going on in different communities and what the needs of out-of-school young adults really are, and provide targeted support around those needs. And finally, we, in multiple ways, will document the lessons learned and lift those up and bring new best practice to the fields of education and workforce and economic development. So work solutions, let me hone in a little bit on what we're focusing on today. By definition, our work solutions, you can see it here, they are designed to identify, design, and advance practices and policies that achieve better outcomes for employers and workers. And we know that companies that embrace DE&I strategies in all aspects of their businesses statistically outperform their peers. I found a data point in a McKinsey and Company report called Delivering Through Diversity. And they state in there that companies that are in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 33% more likely to experience above average profitability and outperform companies in the fourth quartile. So Megan and I, Megan actually will describe two of Jobs First Work Solutions partnerships in a few minutes. But first I'm going to just describe an earlier project that had really strong outcomes and it inspired many of our current partnership models. And what you will learn from it and from what Megan describes is that our practice and our results are really rooted in building, maintaining, and sustaining innovative and effective partnerships. So I'm going to focus in on the Young Adult Sectoral Employment Project. It goes by YASIP. We're not great at naming things, so I'll use YASIP today. It's one of the earliest work solutions that Jobs First worked on and designs. And it was a first of its kind project in the country, actually, to test the effectiveness of adapting sector-based employment strategies or industry-based, they also are called industry-based employment strategies, specifically for 18 to 24-year-olds. YASIP is an evidence-based model. It was conceptualized in response to findings in a public-private ventures 10-year random assignment study called the Sectoral Employment Impact Study. That came out in 2011 or 2012, and it was an evaluation of 3 sector training programs. All of them were multi-generational, and the findings really, I think, probably would feel obvious now, but you have to think about that in 2012 or 11 when it came out. There weren't that many industry-based training programs in the workforce development sector. Most of them were just general work readiness, you know, like resume and interview prep and things like that. They weren't these strong industry-based partnerships that we see a lot of now. And none of them were designed specifically for 18 to 24-year-olds. So they were all multi-generational programs, and that's what public-private ventures studied. And I just want to highlight some of the significant findings in that study, which was that sector training program participants earned 18% more than the control group over the course of 2 years and 29% more in the second year alone. So that was really significant. Participants were more likely to find employment, work more consistently, work in jobs that paid higher wages, and work in jobs that offered benefits. So really, really significant findings. There were earnings gains for each subgroup analyzed. So people were analyzed by ethnicity, race, formerly incarcerated, and young adults. So Jobs First was focused on young adults, and we were intrigued by the findings, and we wanted to look more closely at young adults specifically. In the findings, young adults did not do quite as well as their older counterparts, and we wanted to know why. So we were intrigued by these findings, knowing that there were no young adults specific training programs in the country. We brought together more than 50 practitioners, policymakers, researchers, advocates, to talk about how do we adapt this type of sectoral employment training and expand the approach for young adults and have better outcomes for young adults. And from that, YASIP was designed. Next slide, thanks. So what you're looking at, there's a lot on this slide. Don't feel like you have to hone in on it. This is just an image of what the YASP initiative model looked like from our perspective, from JobsFirst perspective. And that was proposed in 2012. And we brought together a community of practice with employers, community-based organizations, and sector training providers to design new sector training approaches to better serve young adults and employers. And it was really there was like a very specific focus on demand-driven practice that was informed by the labor market. We looked at labor market data. We looked at industries that are friendly to young adults, friendly to underrepresented populations, and connecting with employers in those sectors who were willing to be a part of the initiative and define their own needs. And so JobsFirst, with private philanthropy, we raised and re-granted investments and built this community of learning to test and pilot new programs. Next slide. So this is honing in. If you go back and look, there were like a lot of little Venn diagrams. This is honing in on one of them. This is what like a single YASP partnership model looked like. So you had the employers, you had the training providers, you had community-based organizations. And through a 9-month planning design process, it revealed new sector, young adult specific sectoral approaches that big picture, it was really combining youth development principles like supportive relationships, positive social norms, peers and mentors, opportunities for skills building with specific supports and caseworkers for young adults. And this really launched new sectoral employment approaches where employers help design the curriculum. Next slide. So from this work, again, I see this is tiny and hard to read, it's a little blurry. I will just tell you 10 new sector training programs launched. They were in healthcare, in green jobs, in technology, transportation and logistics, culinary and food service, and technical theater. And also we launched, which we won't get into today, but another employer-led seasonal talent exchange initiative across a few employers. Next slide. So what are the outcomes, right? This is the important stuff, I think, for a lot of people. And I'll highlight the most impactful YASP outcomes, which included those 10 new sector training programs that I mentioned. 3,100 young adults were served across 10 partnerships. More than 1,300 industry recognized credentials were earned by those young adults. Nearly 1,500 people were employed in new jobs across 8 industries, and more than 50 employers contributed to our understanding of the skills needed to succeed in these jobs. And they changed hiring practices and onboarding practices, and they hired or trained new job seekers. More than $15 million were raised and re-granted, and employee earnings and retention rates were increased. So really, some really monumental impacts there. And this, I'm not going to go into this, but YASP, as I said in the beginning, it informs a lot of JobsFirst work. I think the most important thing to know here is that following the success of YASP, New York City proposed a new career pathways model. It was informed by YASP, and they also proposed to launch new industry partnerships across New York City based on this model, and state and federal policy supporting sector-based strategies specifically for young adults in, I don't know if you're familiar with WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which is where a lot of the workforce development federal dollars come through. New state and federal policy was rolled out following the learnings from YASP. And so we looked at this information and now, fast forward a few years and COVID and job openings soared to, at one point, it was like 11 million open positions unfilled, and businesses struggled to find talent. And so we looked at this model and thought about, how do we scale this good work? Each of these partnerships in a year can serve maybe a couple of hundred through these kind of intensive training programs. So looking at this work at scale, Jobs First came up with a new model. Next slide. And this is what we'll dig in a little bit more in today. It's a sector network model. So taking these kind of smaller scale sector training programs, and now years later, there are so many more of them, and not just serving young adults, but serving people of all ages. And now we're bringing together those smaller training programs, education programs, government entities by these sectors to scale this really good practice. And the sector networks builds upon the knowledge that we gain from the best practice and launching two YASP cohorts, multiple related projects that were informed by the YASP model. And we're now focusing that work to scale in 3 sectors: the green economy, tech, and healthcare. And what these networks will do and are doing is to increase the capacity of workforce development and social service providers, scale best-in-class workforce development programs and practice, while being responsive to the labor market and increasing access to good jobs, and advancing systems improvement with customized training to be responsive to employers' needs. So I threw a lot at you, and I intentionally put this slide in to remind me to pause, take a breath before Megan's going to take over. And I know we have a small group here, but please, come off mute and let's discuss some of what I shared. And I know, Chris, so I bet you have questions if Bill and Sharon and Melissa don't, because I know you wanted to learn more about our work too.
I mean, I don't mind just ice breaking with a question, which is, I'm so impressed with the scale and systematic quality of what you've been able to accomplish. And from dabbling in this kind of work, I can imagine that there is some tension between customized work with individuals and their immediate surroundings and kind of replicable, scalable stuff. I know others, smaller projects that I've seen in action work very, in depth with youth and their families and their mentors and so forth. And I just wonder if you have insights about, how do you work with the young person in their context and still work at the scale that you work?
So, Melissa, it's harder for Jobs First to answer questions about direct service and working with young people because we don't, right? We are the intermediary, we are the partnership builder, and we steward this process. We support the partnerships and we support partners who work directly with you. So, of course, anecdotally, I could talk a lot about the tension between what young adults and the tension we're facing now, right? I think all of us can think about that it's a new dawn, it's a new day, right? Like what we're trying to figure out what has changed because of the pandemic. And one of the simplest questions that comes up a lot now, regardless of the stakeholders that we're speaking with, whether it's people in government, people in direct service, people in philanthropy, is where are young adults and what do they want now, right? A bigger challenge that we're facing is we're looking at these numbers. I showed you the numbers in the beginning here that the rate of out of school, out of work young adults in New York City is really high again, coming out of the pandemic, unfortunately. However, we still hear from partners that they're having a harder time recruiting young people for training, for free training, even training with stipends sometimes. And they're also having a harder time feeling like they understand what young people want now. And so, that's more the space where Jobs First will listen to our partners, and then we turn around and we do the research. So we're at a point now where we're researching that and trying to figure out, there's so much to unpack there. And we work with different data partners too, who are examining that. What we do know is there's what's being referred to as the gray or informal economy. We think a lot more young people and all people are working in that space and might not be captured by the Department of Labor data that we typically look at, right? So we might think people aren't working and they might be working. And we might think people are not earning a living wage, and they might be, because they're sort of weaving together employment through all of these different sources and spaces. And I know I'm not specifically answering your question, but I'll open it up, to the group, because I think, you were asking a question to be thought-provoking to all of us. So, if anyone else wants to weigh in, and I see, Bill, you have your hand raised, so I'd love to hear from you. I can't hear you. You're not muted, but I can't hear you, Bill. Maybe it was a mistake. All right, well, Bill, if at any point something changes with your audio, feel free to chime in. Other questions?
I think both Bill and Sharon, with the work that they are doing, not to put it out on the spot, but with the Office of Employment and Training and the Workforce Investment Board, I mean, I think sometimes the questions are hard to articulate, but like, how do we do this delve to understand the disconnect better?
I can jump in with a question while we're waiting. Maybe Bill will figure his audio out. I'm curious. So I love that slide where you're talking about the, all the different measurable outcomes, the 10 new organizations and all the people served. And obviously that's such a big project, multifaceted project. I guess I'm curious, like, what does that look like? Like, how long did that take? That must have been quite a campaign, I imagine, to and like, what role does Jobs First take in these new organizations coming into being? I know you're not doing everything, but you're playing a facilitating role, you're playing a connecting role, I imagine. So I guess, yeah, I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about, like, what does that actually look like? It's a huge accomplishment, but I can't totally like picture it. Like, how does that happen over what period of time, and what went into that?
I wonder if, Megan, if anything that you're presenting might answer some of Chris's question, because I want to make sure we get to the Green Economy Network and the skills mapping work. Chriso, how about if Megan goes over, some of that, and then we can pick up the question?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. All right, Megan, I'll share slides for you.
Follow the question, Chriso, so we don't forget it. Awesome, thank you. Excuse me. Hi again, everybody. As I said at the top, my name is Megan Marshall. I'm the manager of work solutions at JobsFirstNYC. Carrie went over all of that, so I won't dig into the work solution stuff. We're going to tell you specifically about two of our projects, the Green Economy Network, which you see on the screen, and then later I'll talk about another one. So to frame the Green Economy Network from our point of view, building an inclusive green economy in New York City requires understanding the knowledge and skills needed to most effectively execute sustainability, climate resiliency, and so on, while also growing a sustainable pipeline of good jobs, right? And as New York City and state implement plans for climate and equity, I think all of us here know that the time is now to understand and also align data and policy and practice, workforce, economic development, and our role in this effort, as Carrie walked us through our role in many things. Our role is to build a community of practice and purpose among organizations and people working in the green space. And so I'm happy to talk about the design of this multi-stakeholder employer-facing approach with all of you today. So to start, what is it? What are we doing? What is our Green Economy Network? Our Green Economy Network is a collaborative that establishes effective practices, aligns current systems to create green jobs and career pathways with priority on access and sustainability. We believe that a healthy green economy will create jobs and wealth, lower our emissions, improve quality of life, all that great stuff. And the three key goals of our Green Economy Network right now are to develop new trainings, expand employer relationships, and align systems to the new needs of New York's growing and ever-evolving green economy, and the needs and the ever-evolving needs of those employers as the green landscape expands. And as part of this work, we're also starting to examine what's needed to embed green economy job exploration in schools. And this network, along with the other sector networks Carrie mentioned previously, are all in various stages of development as they move toward implementing services. And we like sharing this vision because we think it's a good one. But through this collaborative work, our mission is our vision is a just and sustainable economy in which quality green jobs are accessible to everyone. Just a little thing. We're underachievers over here, but we like to lift that up and showcase that. To dive a little bit further into our partnership, we've launched this network with 3 lead organizations, which are Green City Force, the HOPE program, and Non-Traditional Employment for Women. And these partners, along with members of 4 working groups within the network, are leading the development of the services this partnership will implement across New York City. And at its current state today, we have over 240 individuals engaging with the partnership from 40 unique agencies that are actively participating in the collaborative efforts. And I touched on some of these goals very high level, but to dig a little bit deeper, the priority goals established through that multi-phase partnership development process that Carrie walked through, they're represented on the screen here, but kind of to restate them out loud. The network strives to develop formal employer partnerships to do 3 things: increase economic opportunity for priority population, understand industry need and priority, and develop and market green workforce training in collaboration with employers. We also want to understand policy informing the green space and how to leverage government investments to lift up careers and go out and advocate for them. And this is a through line through all of our work, but we want to establish replicable, scalable paths for job seekers to not only enter, but to also understand what quality career pathways look like in the green and sustainability space. I see a comment in the chat. We'll get to it soon. Network partners are collaborating to establish these referral pathways to targeted employers as well. I'm going through this fast for the sake of time. So as you see on the screen, and as I briefly mentioned, we have 4 working groups. And these 4 working groups are the main drivers behind those higher level goals that I just mentioned. And the 4 work groups that you see on the screen here are strategy, training and wraparound services, employer partnerships and economic opportunities, and policy and advocacy. Each of these working groups has their own set of goals and strategies within the framework of the larger network, and that's to help realize those bigger, higher level goals. To walk through what each group is focusing on to drive this work forward, the strategy working group, you could probably guess it, focuses on strategic planning, decision-making, implementation, and partnership sustainability. Our training and wraparound services work group focuses on how the network collaborates to establish that cross-agency or cross-network referral pathways for job opportunities, training, supportive services, how that functions across everyone involved. Our employer partnerships working group, you guessed it, develops employer partnerships to increase that economic opportunity. They also conduct some of that research that we've been mentioning about employer needs and priorities, and helps the network develop or think through developing new training and how to market that to both job seekers and employers. And lastly, our policy and advocacy work group advocates for policies that increase investment into green economy careers and training. And just a few examples, there are many, but to lift up a few outputs that these groups have completed thus far, we've created a systems map of relevant green economy stakeholders within New York City, and that's continuing to expand as the green space expands. We're developing a green jobs board that's growing into like a digital resource hub for the network, employers, and job seekers. We've put out policy proposals that we put those in front of the current mayoral administration. We've launched focus groups, and we're developing new focus groups to better understand and keep updated on job seeker interests in the green space, as well as those employer needs. And the list goes on, but those are a few key examples we wanted to lift up. And now we're currently approaching the final implementation of our key services. So keep an eye out for what's coming next. All right.
Sorry. I know Bill had something in chat that I didn't get to read, and I didn't know if it was focused on the green economy. If we want to take a moment to look at that.
Yeah, I know that it is. And in case he's having sound issues, I think it's important because we've had this conversation. Just at a very basic level, an energy efficiency company that is well respected and well established and knows what they're doing is, constantly strapped for workforce. And, it seems like you have macro data, and that's great. We're kind of looking for micro, I think. We're kind of looking for just more of a sense of how we operationalize this data to really broker the partnerships between the employment transactions. I mean, is that's something you've done a huge data dive and you're about to see how it serves you, right? Like, in a way, I mean, for the Green Economy Network,
I think it's both. Megan, we both have experience where we know one-on-one, what each agency does and their own like similar struggles to maybe what Bill and what you're seeing in your area. We are at both, like we're kind of at the macro and we are at the micro also, because at the heart of each partnership, it's multiple small workforce development agencies coming together to try and understand, how to make a career pathway, how to get a person from I was going to say from an entry point in a job, but even from, an unskilled point, like they don't have skills. They don't even know what the green economy is, right? So what's the starting point? I think we have some understanding of what our direct service partners. And then on the other side, what employers are feeling at every level or at every stage. Because for the Green Economy Network, there have been, and all of our sector networks, there have been employers, small and large, in the room at the table having these conversations. And, you know, if they're there, you can imagine they're there because they're struggling to find talent in some way, right? And so, Bill, I don't know if Melissa or Chriso, you could kind of articulate, you know, what if what Bill's writing is representative of a lot of green employers in your region.
Yeah,
That
we think it is just from, we did a small webinar that had one of the leading architects, Bill, on the energy efficiency side, and a solar contractor, and all very well-established businesses, and they were all expressing the same pain of doing, you know, working with the best programs and, you know, using New York State, you know, on the job training, and then people would like take full advantage of it and then go start their own businesses. And just, it seems like, I think anything we can learn from how you have actually seen the hiring process play out and the retention play out. You know, because we get the theory, we really appreciate the sophistication with which you are, you know, modeling the theory.
yeah.
We just want the answer. Yeah.
Well, I guess there's not easy answers, otherwise you would have found them already, but I could give an example of something I've seen work really well. You might be familiar with Con Edison. They're the biggest electricity provider here. They do a lot of contracting and subcontracting, and one of their subcontractors, their main role was, well, there were two. One was obviously like kind of meter reading stuff, but also in order to reduce electricity usage in New York City public housing, NYCHA, which, you know, is the population of NYCHA in New York City is the size of Atlanta, I think. So it's the size of a big, smaller city. And the amount of electricity usage by the folks in housing was pressing up against needing another plant in New York City. And so there was the subcontractor's main goal was to inform residents about energy efficiency and why it's important and why it should be important to people who don't necessarily pay their utility bills like one-off and see them individually. And so you're not really incentivized to turn off your lights and, you know, lower your air conditioner or raise your air conditioner temperature or lower your heating temperature. And so one of the programs worked with young adults. They recruited them from NYCHA public housing, trained them in energy efficiency and composting and, you know, the circularity of resources and how it affects everything, right? It's really the green economy can be everything. And making them kind of like trusted messengers. So the employer, the lesson I'm trying to lift up, which I'm not being clear about, is that the employer was very involved in informing the training program and worked hand in hand with the workforce development agency to design it specifically for their needs. And then because they designed the training program, all of the young adults that came out of that program were hired, right? Because they trained them to be these credible messengers to go around NYCHA public housing, literally knock on doors and inform people about what energy efficiency is. And there were all these, you know, amazing young people that are now going and informing their neighbors. And it was so effective that like Con Ed didn't have to build this other plant. And on the employer side, that team that went through that training that they helped build the curriculum for outperformed every other team they had recruited from just the general population. So
Yeah,
it's, they made a skilled ready workforce by being, I think my message is like employers really need to be deeply involved in talent development and early on.
yeah, and training and mentoring needs to be deeply involved. I mean, one of the micro examples we have in the country that we almost pulled them in to be co-presenters, and I just was messing with their schedules too badly, but Black Vanilla Community Foundation in Newburgh has worked closely with the schools, the Newburgh Free Academy, and with not just kids, but their family systems. And, they mentor a kid, but they make the kid bring at least one person that they care about into the conversation. And it's an ongoing structured program with the kind of identifying with the community, identifying with the school, sort of the way your case identifies with the housing authority. It's like we're in this together. It's a big cohort that's organic. It's not just like a constructed cohort. And I'm guessing, Bill, in some of our previous go-arounds, we've talked with, some of the projects like Place Core and Peaceful Guardians that are trying to nurture young people in a very place-based way. And I mean, maybe that's what we try to understand better as a principle.
Yeah. I don't know, Megan, if you want to chime in. I know you have some other stuff to show, but we're coming close to time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're gonna have time to talk about the next thing. What do you think?
Yeah, sorry if we totally derailed you, but
No, it's okay.
I don't think we're gonna bolt it exactly 4.
That's okay. I think Megan and I would rather, help answer the questions you have. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing I was going to say about the place-based comment that you were making, which does tie into the second thing that we were going to show that we ran out of time for. Like Carrie was mentioning before, a lot of this like labor data that we have that informs a lot of these relationships and programs and all that stuff doesn't paint the clear picture. So we're currently in the process of I can't talk, I'm sorry. We're launching our skills mapping initiative where we're using an AI data tool to map the skills of communities by zip code so that we can better look at what exists in communities in comparison to the labor data that we do have and many other things. But that's one thing I think you're right, like there needs to be more place-based focus, not only in how we interact with these employers or workers, but also how we're using our data to inform those decisions. And I agree with Carrie about the employer being a huge part of workforce development training. I think that's the most successful for sure. And I was reading a theme in what was in the chat of it being short term. And I think if the thing that's blaring in my mind, because I used to work there, is non-traditional employment for women. They do a lot of work with unions, and unions have the apprenticeship model, right? So if there's something where you're working with an employer and you're training people in partnership with an employer, you get them that entry-level job that they're being trained in, but there has to be an if then, what's next, what's after that, either within that employer or within an additional partner. And I think thinking through that from the outset is really key to making people stick long-term. And I think employers, they do forecast what their needs might be. We don't always know, but I think that's something that's important to think through in strategizing with an employer, if that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you, Bill. I wish we could hear you, Bill. I'm sorry your mic isn't working.
I know, hear and see.
Hopefully this is the beginning of a relationship. We don't want to look too perfect or anything,
Exactly.
but this is an important conversation, and we know the county is interested in it, and we're all very interested in it. I mean, it's the network that we serve, even though they're like webinared out.
We understand.
Yeah, and I know we're getting down to time too, and I don't need this to be a long response, but I just to say too, I've experienced some of what Bill's talking about from the other perspective, and a lot of my friends and peers I think have too. So there's this big new green economy, right? But like, where is it? Like, it doesn't seem accessible. It's not easy to know exactly what it is or where it is. It's like, I mean, yeah, there's heat pump installer or like residential solar. There's some clear paths, but then there's a lot of other paths that are very unclear and very mysterious. And it's like, supposedly it's this huge emerging economy, but I don't know where to start. And I'm pretty well educated about it. And a lot of people I think are, way more confused about where to even start getting involved in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have an easy answer because, I always say I've learned a ton about the green economy over the past few years, but I'm certainly not an expert in the green economy. The best answers I've heard to that from people who work in the green economy all the time, so I steal it and repeat it, is that I think all of us are waiting for these kind of new sexy job titles that we're like waiting for something we never heard of before, and sure, there's some things in offshore wind and some things in solar, and there will be lots and lots of new job titles that we never heard before coming in the next 10 years in every sector, green in particular. But what I say is that it's the greening of jobs that you're already fairly familiar with, particularly in the trades, like electricians and plumbers, and building systems, and those systems are becoming automated, so people have to learn new technology to do the job. And a plumber might be, still doing the job that he did as a plumber, but maybe there's some new way or something is digitized. And so people who are in the trades might have to learn new skills. It's not just reskilling, but it's upskilling the existing workforce. Yeah. So Bill is saying we're very frustrated because we know what the data shows with regard to unemployment and underemployment employed workers, but we scratch our heads and say, where are they? What are they doing to stay alive and make a living? Okay, so we're seeing the same thing here. I don't know. I know, Megan, you read a lot about this and consider, what young adults want and are interested in, and it is a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah, I would interject a comment. Bill and I and a bunch of others were on a call with some groups working with the sort of, might be marginalized, might be saved youth. And the comment was made, it's really hard for somebody to jump into even the greatest job training if they're sleeping in their car. And,
100%.
the importance of integrated engagement, and it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Yep. And you're hitting the nail on the head of why networks, like why Jobs First, a lot of our partnerships and our networks are because there are agencies that are experts at those social supportive services that maybe they might not do sector, or industry-based training, but they are one of, in the tops of providing housing guidance, or helping people with food insecurities, or, you name it. Right. So in a network setting, you have all of those actors at the table and hopefully can serve people better.
Yeah, I think the intersection of the supportive services and workforce development is hypercritical for that exact reason. I mean, we all know COVID and the surrounding and events of the last few years have only exacerbated that. And what Carrie alluded to earlier, this gray economy, there's also, I was talking to somebody recently at a youth employment conference who mentioned another thing COVID did for young people is like kind of change their frame of reference for how they spend their time, because this is a little deep and dark, I'm sorry, but like we learned that life is short, right? And so there's a bigger push in a lot of what we're hearing from our workforce partners. Students are wanting this part-time work or this non-typical schedule, or to do their own thing and do a gig or like a freelance platform and part-time at a store, whatever it is. And so I think that there's like a shift in mindset that's also showing up as this, like, where are people? Because they're in so many different places, so you can't pinpoint it's there. So as Carrie said, I read and think about this a lot. So I'm hoping that we can start to embed some of those new ideas into workforce and think about how do we uplift some of this entrepreneurial spirit we're seeing come out of young folks, and how they spend their time and that search for freedom of time. I think there's a lot of different things that intersect, and it's important for us to talk to young people about those things wherever we find them, and see them, and then integrate their opinions into the work. And I think that will be very helpful in many ways. But I'll get off my soapbox for now.
That's very helpful. I'm sure this is the beginning of a productive and interesting relationship somehow. We don't know how yet.
Yeah, one day we'll have to connect about the skills mapping initiative further, so we can update you guys on that. You might be interested in that one too.
Chris, our last words?
Oh, I don't know. I thought that was a great presentation. And it did seem like there's even more, and you had even more to present that we didn't get to, but yeah, maybe at some point in the future, circle back around.
That sounds great. Thank you guys for having us. And thank you, Bill. It was nice meeting you virtually.
Yeah, and Bill, yeah, it does sound like you're offering a great opportunity to folks, but yeah, maybe part of the issue is like, what else are they contending with in their life? And do you have partners that offer social supportive services to make sure you're getting the right candidates, these good opportunities? Well, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Carrie and Megan. Really
All right.
appreciate it.
Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.